Today, I wanted to talk about the EC2 instances a bit more in detail, and in particular about the different types of IP addresses that you'll see on in your EC2 dashboard. So just to show you where I am at the moment, so I logged into AWS, and you have the new experience now. So you have these on the dashboard. You can see your instances running, your elastic IPs, and we'll talk about that shortly about the elastic IPs. But so you click on your EC2 dashboard, you have instances running, you click on your instances here, and the filter is running instances, which I don't have any. So I just close that filter, and there you go. You have a demo instance here that's stopped, and that is the demo instance we'll be talking about today. So if I click on this, you'll see that the details of that instance are showing up below. And here you'll see that there's no public IP address, there's no DNS public, and there's no elastic IP address yet. That's because the instance is stopped. But what we do have is we have the private IP addresses and the DNS, and you have your virtual private cloud ID as well as the subnet ID. Okay, so now you can see here this IP address is 172.31.20.60, and this is an internal network address for this instance because it's located in the private cloud, and it's in this subnet um, in the Amazon data center. Okay, and there's the actual DNS name internally. So this means that internally, if you have other instances running in the same in the virtual private cloud or in the same subnet within Amazon's data center, you could actually access it via this particular address. You don't have to go onto the internet. If you have it in the same virtual private cloud, you can actually access it in, locally or internal to that cloud, because it doesn't need to go on the internet. It's not an external device to Amazon. Now, if we look at this internal address a bit more in detail, you'll see, and I've opened another tab already for you. You see here that the subnet, this is the subnet down here, the subnet ID. If I bring that up on, it pops up in a tab here on the virtual private cloud. It's the virtual private cloud VPC, and you'll see here that this subnet is within this virtual private cloud, and you can see the range of addresses that are covered by that subnet. And if you just bring up a simple tool that will show you the IP addresses that are available for this range, and you'll see here it says 172.31.16.0 to 172.31.31.255, which is 4,095 IP addresses. And sure enough, our instance IP address is in that range. So 31.20.60, 31.20.60 is within that range. So that's just a confirmation there that the of what we're seeing here. Okay, and again, this is the actual VPC, the virtual private cloud instance, where it has a larger range of IP addresses, and these are various information about this virtual cloud, but we're not going to go too much in detail on this one. Just to show you again, the subnet, that's the range, and we just determined that this particular instance is in that range of the addresses. Okay, so now that's about the private addresses, which are there because the instance is being created. Even though it's stopped, it has that IP address, which is local, internal to that cloud. Now, if I'm to start this instance, we'll see now, if I start this instance, and it'll take a few seconds, I think, to restart. There you go. So now the instance is running. And once the instance is running, you'll see that now we have a public IP address and we have the associated DNS for that instance as well. And this public address means that now we can connect to that instance. This is how we remote in to that instance using SSH, or whether you have, depending on the operating system that's on there. Here we have, I think it's Linux. So yeah, it's Linux here. So you could log in through a terminal window, but now you can log in through that terminal window using this IP address or the DNS. So that's the public aspect of it. So now anyone with the right credentials can actually access this instance by providing this IP address. And you can see that the private IP address stays the same, but we now have the public IP address. Okay, so now if we want to talk a bit about elastic IPs, that is what it is allows you to have an IP address and assigned to an instance, and it stays with that instance. And why am I saying that it stays? Because if I'm to stop and start this instance, you'll see that this public IP address will change because it's not fixed to that particular instance. Let's just stop the instance. We'll just refresh now to there, it stopped. So now we've lost our public address, and it's the IP, the private is still the same. If we restart it now, oops, sorry. There we go, it's running. And now the address is different. So it says here, if I just copy this address, and we can make another tab, and I can just paste this address here. And just to show you that it actually has changed, although you could always just go to the previous a few minutes of this video, but I'll just show you here again how it changes. And again, you see how easy it is to stop and start these instances. It's just waiting there. It's stopped now, so let's start it again. Start shortly. There, it's running. And now you can see here 38210, 38210, 239, 3 very different, yeah, compared to this IP address we copied early on. So you can see there that the public IP address keeps changing. So this is where if you have a system that's relied upon by many other people and they need that address to remain the same, you can't just keep telling, oh, by the way, the IP address has changed, can you update your network settings? it's not practical, and it's very unprofessional as well, in terms of if you have clients that are running systems, or running reports, or whatever systems or processes they have running on the instance. You can't just keep telling them change your IP address. And this is why you have the concept of the elastic IP address. And this elastic IP address, you can assign it to this instance, and it will stay the same. No matter if you stop it and you restart it, that IP address will be assigned to that particular instance of, well, it'll be assigned to that instance, and it'll stay fixed. And what you can do is that you can later on, if for some reason you need a different hardware specification for your instance, you can change that and then reassign the elastic IP address to that instance. And let's have a look at that. Let's have a quick look at that. And at the moment here, we have no IP addresses, elastic IPs, so I'll just click on allocate IP address, and I'll click on allocate. No need to go into too much detail. And here we have a public IP that's now allocated. So we have that. And now if I click on this, it shows the details of this IP address. So it's a public IP address, and there's the allocation details for that. Now I can associate this IP address with an instance. I can choose my instance, which is already running, and I can associate that. And now that's done. And if I now go back to my instances, you'll now see, just refresh that. We should now see that it has an elastic IP address, and there it is. There's the IP address, and you can see actually they match. Yeah, it's been reassigned. So the public IP address of this is the same, is now assigned to this instance. And let's take a quick look at what happens when we stop and start. So I'll copy this as I've done in the past. We'll just keep this in a tab on this side. So that's the IP address, that's the public IP address. So let's stop the instance. It's stopping now. And there you go, it stopped. But look what we have here. Even though it stopped, we still have a public IP address. Obviously, you try and access it, you'll get a connection failed or similar errors because it's actually down. But now we have this, you can see that this address is still allocated to this instance, and if we start it again, it should just stay at the same. We shouldn't notice any change here. It's running, and as you can see, the public IP address has not changed at all. So just go back here just to confirm, 39.240.133, 39.240.133. So you can see here that this is actually now fixed, and is the concept of elastic is a sense that, well, in my opinion, why it's called elastic, it's public, it's fixed to that instance, but elastic in the sense that we can actually change what instance it's assigned to. So for example here, if I go to this information, there's actually options to associate it to different instances. You see, we can disassociate the IP address from this instance, and we can associate it to another instance. So if I choose here, I could have 2 or 3 instances here, and I can associate that IP address with that instance, and clients coming in will be completely unaware of the change. But if I'd increase the performance, you can imagine they'll see better performance. So that's, in that sense, I think that's why they call it elastic. And that's pretty much it, what I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. So just to summarize, what we covered today is the private IP address, the public IP address, and then the elastic IP address. And thank you all for watching.